Hi there, and welcome to the HR Podcast. This is Linda Misegadis.
And Cyndi Manuel, and we'll be your co-hosts. After spending years working in and with HR, we thought, why not start a podcast to support the important HR community? We believe the way things have always been done isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. So we're diving into topics that support HR and working women as they navigate the future of work. We're talking about professional growth and also how we can support each other as human beings.
We can't wait to bring you insights from HR experts, thought leaders, and inspiring women who are making a real difference in their organization and communities. They'll share their journeys and tips on balancing work and life in a better way. We're excited to learn alongside you and hope you'll pick up some great takeaways from tips and tricks to worksheets that you can actually use in your daily life. So grab your favorite beverage
or lace up your walking shoes and join us for the HR Her Resources podcast.
Hey, Cyndi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
How was your week?
It was good. I did some planning for the pup.
Oh,
so, you know, Buckley is getting a little older now.
Right.
So we made an appointment for a veterinarian visit. When we rescued him, he had some of his shots, but he's going to get the rest of them.
Okay.
And then we're going to take him in and get him groomed. He is just a big old fur ball right now.
Now tell everybody what kind of dog Buckley is.
So Buckley is my little mini golden doodle, or so we've been told. We'll see.
Right.
He's growing very quickly. So we're thinking, is he really going to be mini? Yeah, but he is adorable. He is a stinker, but he is an adorable little stinker. And so we're going to get him groomed.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is he's getting snipped.
Ugh.
So
it's so good to do it, though. I was just watching some old episodes of Dr. Jeff. He's the one. They've got the Planned Parenthood. He's the vet that runs that down. And they do
local here.
Here local. Yeah. And he was actually had a show for a while on I don't know, maybe and National Geographic or Animal Channel or one of those. And it was all about what they do there. But he's got this whole thing where they'll do spays and neuters for $10.
That's so good.
Yeah, because there are, the statistics are so sad and it's horrible. We just watched a documentary on that, and it was, 4 million dogs and cats are put to sleep every single year in this country.
That's where Buckley was headed.
Yes.
Yeah, on a truck with 85 other puppies.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I can't even imagine. My daughter always says, I would have loved to have been on that truck with 85 puppies.
Right? I know. Yeah. No, that's in a different time. That's what I would definitely want to be doing, is just rescuing all those animals. But huge proponent of spaying and neutering. So poor little Buckley,
I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, well, they are the most resilient things in the world, though. Animals are just amazing, and how quick they heal, and how they just adapt so fast. And so he'd be down for a minute and back up and be in his normal puppy self in no time.
Yeah, for sure.
I love it. No, that's
what's going on.
Well,
how about
you? It was a busy week. We had some leadership meetings here in Colorado, which is always fun. And then we also, I've been traveling a lot.
Yes,
and so
you are traveling
always,
a lot.
And, I like the going to different places. I just don't like getting there. So when we finally get to like the Star Trek, where we can just like, beam me up, Scotty, and get me there. Like that's the part I hate, is just the actual act of travel. Really bugs me because airports are
not easy,
crazy busy these days.
Yeah.
And even worse than since post-COVID is weird. It just seems like
Denver
airports.
International is one of the worst. I will
it
say.
Is so busy out there all the time.
Yes.
And so, you're right, because I'll go to other big cities and I feel like I just, in and out, smooth as pie. Smooth as pie, that's a terrible analogy, but smooth as silk. There we go. But yeah, DIA, holy cow.
They're
and the more they improve
it,
the more I'm like, is this
more challenging?
Yeah. So
it's like they're messing with us, right?
I think so.
Hey, they're getting used to this. Let's shift it a little.
Let's change it up, and it is. I think DIA, isn't it like one of it's either I don't think it's number one, but we're like in that top 5 of the world's
International.
busiest airports, which
Yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah.
Think about that.
It's
I
pretty
remember flying
awesome.
in and out of Stapleton and running,
Yeah.
pre 9/11,
With your
running in at
suitcase.
the last
Yeah.
minute, kind of like skating into the
Yeah.
terminal, and
Yeah.
and then going and seeing your family, like you could meet your people right there at the
Yes.
gate, and
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
times
What
were
a
much
different
simpler,
time.
for sure.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, all good stuff. Just crazy busy like everybody else in the world these days. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, no, but it's so good to be in the studio with you today.
You
We're going to talk a
too.
little bit about AI because AI is such a
Speaking of the
hot
future.
topic. Speaking of the
Yeah.
future, well, and it's funny because I think about some of this stuff, and I remember as a little kid sitting there watching the Jetsons and thinking to myself, well, in my lifetime, this will never happen.
Never. Yeah.
And
What
then
a
look
good
at Teams
analogy.
and Zoom and Skype and all. I mean,
Yeah.
look at the thing. And even honestly, to a certain degree, short of it coming through a tube shooting into your kitchen, you can just, on your phone, go to an app and you have food
Order
delivered to your
food.
house. Yeah. And
Order
so,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Anything you need, want, and they're happy to pick up some things along the way for you while they're bringing you your
Yeah.
dinner kind of thing. And so, but it's amazing just how much the world is constantly changing. And
Yes.
I do remember thinking as a kid, oh, this will never happen in my lifetime. And yet here it
Yeah.
is. And
Yeah.
now here we are seeing so much more about artificial intelligence. The funny thing,
Right.
though, to me about artificial intelligence and just kind of what's going on is that it's not really all that new. It's just advancing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just there's so much attention being
There
paid to it
is.
right now.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it is because of things like Chat GPT,
Yes.
right? That was a big one that came along a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And then really just this whole idea of this fear, like that the robots are taking over.
Yeah.
And we can thank the movies for that, right?
Yeah,
Because I think
exactly.
they're definitely helping create a lot of that fear.
Yeah.
But what are you kind of hearing and seeing
Yeah.
as it relates to AI?
I do find it fascinating. And initially, when I first heard about ChatGPT, I
Yeah.
thought, gosh, I'm not really sure.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
one of my interns was like, Cyndi, you just got to get in there and start messing around with it.
Very true.
So at the time, I thought, okay, let's just do something pretty simple here, pretty
Yeah.
easy. I have these 5 things in my refrigerator. What's something I can make for dinner?
Oh, I haven't even thought of that one. I love that.
And I was like, oh, that was fun. So that I
Yeah.
kind of caught the bug.
Yeah.
I do find actually that it is like it's kind of a helpful little thought partner. Or if
Yeah.
I'm putting a sentence or an email together and I'm like, it's not
Yeah.
quite coming together the way I want it to,
Yeah.
then I kind of use it for those sorts of things.
Right.
But again, I think, one of the things I had heard on a webinar that I uh, listened into this past
Yeah.
week from Gartner, actually, and they
Okay.
do all kinds of
They do.
surveying
Yeah.
and things,
Gartner
right?
does so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I heard for HR specifically was that AI is something that's being heavily adopted, but the
Yeah.
maturity of AI specific to HR is not nearly as mature as the interest and the adoption level. So here, everybody was being asked to embrace this thing and
Right.
get into it. And the technology isn't quite as mature
Yeah.
as what the interest and the adoption is. I found that
Interesting.
fascinating.
That is very
Yeah.
fascinating. Well, and that's, I think, I know that's been a big fear. One of my colleagues, she was actually speaking at the SHRM conference,
Mm.
and they were talking about AI there. And she told me, she's like, Linda, all of these HR people, like they were terrified,
Yeah.
as they're listening to these conversations and what's happening is this real fear. And it
Mhm.
is kind of interesting when it comes to HR because there is not a ton of adoption around it. And I think it is because of the people side of human resources, right? And so
Yeah.
that's fascinating what you learned with Gartner related
Yes.
to that.
I thought that was
No,
interesting.
that is very interesting for
Yeah.
sure. Why did they give you any indication of like why? Is it just simply because like we're seeing a lot of people embracing the concept, a lot of
That's right.
fear, but embracing the concept and maybe even a little, I don't know, is it quicker than maybe other things in the past? fast that people have embraced this technology. But to your point, we have a habit of pushing things out really fast without necessarily having all of the pieces.
Yeah. So 3 of the areas that they were talking about were, that where HR is leveraging AI,
Uh-huh.
specifically chatbots,
Okay.
which you do see that a lot,
I
and
love
I
the
actually
idea of
think that's a
chatbots.
really great
Yeah, I
idea,
totally
right?
agree. Yeah.
So if HR, going back to our last episode where we talked about some of that, bottom line
Yes.
work, right? So
Yeah.
some of the tactical things. Well, if you're getting asked the same questions over and over again,
Right.
frequently asked questions, put them in a chat bot. To
Yeah.
me, that makes a lot of sense.
I
So
agree.
there's a lot of that, but the gentleman was talking about how, some of the technology companies out there haven't quite honed it quite yet. So
Sure.
I think there's
Sure.
stuff getting rolled out all the
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
you're seeing chatbots and some AI sort of integrated within some of the
Seems like it's
software.
better than it was because,
Yeah,
again, chatbots are not necessarily new. It's
that's
more
right.
the application and the technology behind the chatbots
That's right.
seems like it is a lot better and perhaps a little bit more advanced.
Hmm.
Because I even think about, in the days when we had people who were in different time zones or maybe even like they work 24/7. And so they were overnight shifts and thinking about how would you, a chatbot's great in
Wouldn't that
that.
be great?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I remember answering emails at 2 o'clock in the morning
I
just so we
was
could provide.
just gonna say when we rolled out in 2007, right?
Yes.
Before all of this kind of technology,
Yeah,
the questions were definitely coming into us, and the
absolutely.
expectation was a very quick
We were
turnaround.
responding to them. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yep.
rightfully so.
And you're
But
right. We were responding to emails all night long, and it would
yes,
have been nice in those because some of those could have easily been answered by a
they were very
chatbot. Didn't
frequently asked
necessarily
questions.
need, but it would not have been enough to just put out some FAQ document because a lot of the people that were calling us too, they are on a 24-hour shift. A lot of them were
Hmm.
public safety, so we had a lot of our
Yes,
police officers, our firefighters, who that's when they were on shift and they had these questions,
that's
and
right.
so just putting out some FAQ and say, "Well, go to this
Go check that
website."
out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
they
well, they
would
needed a little more of that human
interaction,
connection. Yeah,
right?
yep, I
Yeah,
totally agree.
yeah.
No, that's fascinating.
So, 2 other areas that HR has started to really tap into
Yeah.
AI based on Gartner is recruitment
Okay.
and learning and
Oh, I
development.
like those
And
both.
so
Yeah.
I think they were saying, there is more to come on
Yeah.
these things. So I think it's just, again, anytime you roll out new technology, there's going to be refinement. There's going to,
Absolutely.
things are going to get better over time.
That makes
So,
sense. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago in Chicago with the state personnel executives, and there
mm,
was a session there, a lot of conversation again around AI. Interestingly enough, most of the people in the audience, when they were like, "How many of you are embracing, the AI?" Most of them were government officials. Very few raised their hands, and then they said, "Okay, for our private sector partners, raise your hand." Of course, almost all of us raised our hands, right? But I think it was maybe Accenture who was doing a session on this as it relates to this whole recruitment idea.
hmm,
And part of that was that like, let's say that my first language is Spanish and
yes,
I'm going through this recruitment process and maybe the person that I'm talking to, the recruiter or the HR business partner, maybe they're not bilingual. And in the past, we might have tried to struggle through that, or you might have tried to find an interpreter. In this case, they used AI in order to be
smart.
able to translate so they could
Oh,
still have the human interaction. So they were on a
hmm,
video chat and they showed this. It was kind of cool to see that they were able to demo this. And they had, the person who was speaking to the recruiter. And so they had that face
yeah.
ability so they could see each other.
The visual,
But
yeah.
it was translating for them. And so
I
she
love
was able
that.
to speak in her native language. The person on the other end was speaking English, but it was
Mhm.
translating back and forth. And then it
Mm.
also came up on the screen. And so, you could read through it so you'd have the notes there and everything.
Yeah.
And I thought that
Much
is an
more
excellent,
inclusive,
very
right?
much. And I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of that, right? Because you
Yes.
also think about another use case. I was in the Commonwealth of Mass, and they were talking about for neurodiverse. So
Mhm.
that's an untapped population of
Yeah.
amazing resources in jobs, but they don't interview well, and they struggle during the recruitment process a lot of times.
Yeah.
And most of the recruiting and that is not set up for people who deal with those neurodiverse diversity issues. And so being able to, or not even issues, opportunities, right? And so being able to have those types of situations as well, where they were utilizing AI to help in
Yeah.
those situations.
I mean, to me, that sounds brilliant.
I
You
agree.
know,
That's to me is a very
those are the
positive use.
opportunities when it comes to
Yes.
AI. And so that might then, back to what you were asking before, I don't know exactly why,
Yeah.
but that might lend to why the adoption has been better, right? People are
Yeah.
seeing the opportunities, which is great.
Yep. Yep.
And AI has opportunities to catch up.
Yeah. No,
you
it's
know?
very true.
Are you looking for innovative and creative content options? Needing audio or video production or consulting? Or do you just have a great idea that you want to bring to life? LJM Productions specializes in making the big picture attainable, from commercials and social media content to just audio-visual cleanup and editing. We are here to make your next big project a reality. For more information or to receive a quote, email ljmproductionsco@gmail.com.
Well, and one of the things that I thought was really fascinating when you had shared the slides with me is that when they were talking about the pace of change being faster, and that when Twitter came out, it took 24 months before it was adopted. ChatGPT, 5 days, and people were utilizing.
Isn't that crazy?
Holy cow.
Yeah. I think some of
Amazing.
that kind of goes back to the, and not everything goes back to the pandemic, but
Yeah.
I do think that in general, people across the world saw there was a necessity for change.
Yes.
And so we changed pretty literally overnight.
Yeah, that's very
so
true.
I think the pace of change, what I am seeing too, just generally, is the pace of change is getting faster.
Very true.
The saturation of change is getting heavier because people, there is a lot more, people are able to change faster, shift, pivot, whatever you want to call it. So I think that's probably impacting AI as well. But I also think that's where AI can support if people have the right mindset around it.
Yes, I agree.
There's some scary parts to it too.
course,
Scarlett
yeah.
Johansson, that whole thing about her, I forget what the story was, but like the AI had done such a likeness of her, even she was upset, and I think filed a lawsuit.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it is kind of crazy. But,
it is, and there's always going to be an unethical use of it, right? And I've seen, some of the funny uses, but maybe not funny to the people who are being used in those AI situations. I do notice that now it says that it was generated by AI, but there was like during the basketball finals, they had from the Lakers, he was on there talking bad about all of his team. And they use this. And I thought, if I were the person that they were using in that situation, I might be a little upset about that too. Because if you didn't know any better,
you would think that it really
spreads
that person.
Bad information. Because I know they did the same thing for the Nuggets. They had Joker on there, and he was, again, saying negative things about, which he would never do. It's just not even his character to do that. But the problem is that if you aren't astute enough to recognize that it is something that is being generated by artificial intelligence, you may now think that, that this is a terrible person and listen to the awful things that he's saying. So, it is always the hard part of that unethical utilization.
You've got the good and the
always
bad,
a balance in that.
Yeah.
No, for sure. Well, the internet is a great example, right? I mean, we were all terrified of the internet, and the internet has also been in one of those things where there's a balance. There's good and there's
absolutely
bad
true.
about the internet.
Yes.
So
your cell phone, all of it, right?
Yes, yeah. No, I was a diehard BlackBerry. I was not giving up that BlackBerry.
Remember.
Oh my gosh. Even today, if the BlackBerry could do what the iPhone could do, I would still be using my BlackBerry because I loved that thing. It was so amazing. And I was very resistant to making that shift. So, it is amazing how, but I think it's a really good point on just kind of like how we've been forced to change faster.
Yeah.
You don't have the luxury of time and kind
That's
of
right.
hanging around.
Or
You'll
one
fall
change
very
at a
far behind,
time. Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
in business, yeah, personally, in industry, and in some things personally, you may not care. Like maybe I'm always impressed with those people who don't have a cell phone in their hand every
All
minute
the
of every day,
time.
right?
Yes.
And so there's that aspect of it. But if I think about it from a work perspective, like even back in the day, when I was in running payroll departments, like I couldn't take a vacation
Yeah.
because you couldn't take the computer with you.
Right.
Then when they came up with laptops, all of a sudden, you could take the
And the
laptop with you and
cloud
the cloud.
and
Yeah,
right.
everything has changed. Because
Information is
even back
available
then you
everywhere.
had to,
Yes.
using a dial-up modem and it was slow as heck.
Yes.
And so all of those sorts of things. But you're right, the speed of change is just crazy these
Yeah.
days. So
And I think, I mean, everybody knows that one of the biggest points of resistance around AI is it's going to replace people.
that is a huge fear.
There's no
Yes.
replacement of people. There's always going to be a need.
Yes, yes.
But I think I understand where that comes from because
Yeah.
even at the city and county, when we were trying to centralize payroll and HR, where
Right.
people were saying, but this payroll is what I do. This is a big
Yes.
part of my job. And we had to sort of reframe it to say, with that time that you're currently doing payroll, what
Yes.
else could you be doing for
Absolutely.
your agency? And so I think it's a matter of sort of shifting
I
the
agree.
mindset of if I didn't have to do this administrative thing or
Yeah.
like I think I was sharing with you, I was talking with someone who had done an employee survey.
Okay.
And there was all kinds of data that came in from the
Yeah.
employee survey. They fed that into an AI. The AI not only kind of sorted through the trends of the survey data, but
Right.
also some outstanding information
Sure.
in a
Yeah.
matter of seconds,
Yeah.
where it would have taken this person days, maybe even weeks, to sort
Right.
through all of this, to be able to present her with all this information. Now she can do something with it.
Yes.
Right? So
Yes.
that's just one example
No, it's a
of,
great example. I
something
think
that,
so. Well, I think, I was thinking back in the days when I used to have to go through and audit GLs for any type of discrepancies. And, after a payroll would process, it would take me days to get through all of
yeah,
that. And I'm sure I missed some things along the way.
for sure.
And
You're
I think
human.
in the use of AI in those situations where it could go through, analyze that data much more quickly and figure out the outliers. And frankly, I would have happily
Given that over.
that would have been something I would have definitely. But well, and one of the things that that I thought was interesting too is in the Gartner presentation is they were talking about the adoption of AI solutions and kind of how they're either deployed or in use today. And it was fascinating because you think about, where we've come, and they talked a little bit about like from rules-based systems, and then, graph techniques. I mean, you think about even that being able to
How
utilize
interesting,
yeah,
right?
fascinating on
The
that.
dashboard.
Yes, the
yeah,
dashboards and being able to see, think about how much easier data is to
that's
consume
right.
and actually get a visual on today. And then, they jumped to kind of like machine learning because that's a big part of it. Some of what we were talking about is really around machine learning to where it is now a little bit more of that generative AI where it is still a component of that is still machine learning, but it's now generating more content. It's doing more. And I
So
think there's
interesting.
some really cool things about somebody was telling me the use of it in an emergency room, that it was able to go through records. Now, again, not in a
Your
trauma
medical
situation,
records.
right, where you're like making decisions in that moment. But
Right.
let's say you come into the hospital in
Yeah.
the emergency room and you've got something happening, and but they really need to take a look at your medical medical records, they've got time, not a trauma,
Yeah.
that they're using AI to actually be able to go through all of that information,
Wow.
and then think about the treatment that they would provide you, where in the past they would have just made a moment's decision.
And educated.
Yes,
Yeah,
and maybe
right.
they didn't even have access to all that information, and that could have
Yeah.
resulted in something very bad for you potentially, because they didn't know something.
An
So there are some
allergy or
pretty,
something. Yeah.
an allergy, maybe a medication that you're taking, a
Right.
reaction that you might possibly have to
Yeah.
a certain treatment, and
Yeah.
it was amazing what
I
they're
feel
doing
like
there.
I just understand about this much
Oh,
of it.
me too. I'm 100%
There's
with you.
so much
Yes.
to it,
Yeah.
but I feel like there's a lot of opportunities that we're going to continue to see. And I think just
I
the
think so too.
curiosity around it
Yes, I agree.
is good.
So, like, what kind of advice would you give to those HR professionals out there who maybe are a little afraid of it because they think it's going to take their jobs
Yeah.
away?
Yeah.
So there's one side of that as to what should they be thinking about as it relates to them personally and the jobs
Hmm.
that they're doing, but then also what can HR be doing to help alleviate some of that fear that other
Right.
employees are having as it relates to AI and the idea that maybe because frankly, a lot of the layoffs in tech companies right now are being blamed on the advancement of
Yeah.
AI, and I think that that's only helping to create more fear
Yeah.
that the humans are being replaced. So, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think kind of goes back to our last episode a little bit,
Yeah,
and that is educate yourself. So,
yeah,
find those articles, and this webinar that we're referring to here from Gartner, that was a free webinar, and
yes.
it
We'll
was
post the link out to it because I
perfect.
think if
Perfect.
they almost always I think Gartner likes to replay those things. So we'll find it and we'll
Yeah.
send the link out. If nothing else, we'll give you access to the slides from that.
Yeah,
So
that would be
yeah.
great. But I think just educating yourself and also again just sitting down and kind of thinking about what are some of the things that where AI would be helpful for me that would
Yeah.
free me up to not have to do things manually.
Yes. Yeah.
Human error, take some
Yeah.
of the human error out of it,
Absolutely.
but then free me up to the second part of your question, be able to
Yeah.
support my employees, the
Yes.
organization. And are
Absolutely.
there initiatives and opportunities within our organization where we could say, hey, you know what? It'd be really great to bring that visibility back to what you were
Yes.
talking about in a dashboard view, put some of those statistics around
Yeah.
employee surveys and things like that, but even additional data points
Yes.
into AI and see how it can sort of serve up that information for our
Absolutely.
leaders to be able to make informed decisions and things like
I
that.
love that. And again, we talked about it in our last episode as well, educating LinkedIn learning. If you
Yes,
are a subscriber, if you're not, I would highly suggest you are. There is so much information now out
really
there.
is.
And,
Yeah.
your point on like only knowing a little bit, I didn't understand prompts. That you have
Mm.
to know what you're asking,
And
Chat
get very
GPT or any
specific
of those.
and
Yeah, again, the more specific you are, the
yes.
more prescriptive the
Yes.
information is back to you.
Great point.
It was just some simple things that I learned about how to say, or even how I wanted it to be framed. So
Yes.
saying, I am a highly successful podcaster and I'm talking about this. The more information you can provide to
That's right.
the better information that comes back to you. Otherwise,
Yes.
you're just getting all this generic information.
That's such a
So
really good point, too. The more information that you can put in there, and even to say, I want this to sound conversational, or I want it to be
yeah.
professional, or
Yes.
give me a list of, 5 things that I can make with these 27 ingredients that I have in my
Absolutely.
refrigerator
Which I
and
still love. I'm
cabinets.
going to totally use that one.
What are, I've never been to this country. Tell me 10 things that I
Yes.
can't miss when
Oh,
I'm
for
there.
sure.
Those
Yeah.
like make it fun too, to be able to dive
Absolutely.
in with something a bit lighter than maybe
Yes.
work, you
Very
know?
true. Very true. And, we were kind of touching on this a little bit is there's always been this fear that like humans are going to be replaced by something. And we've always had, from when computers came. I mean, I
Right.
remember handwriting payroll checks back in the day.
Yeah.
And back then payroll was a little simpler even. HR was a little simpler. What we did was not as hard as what it is today. It's gotten more complex. But I think about even then we were afraid of technology.
Yeah.
Then we started to embrace technology.
Yeah.
And now think about what we do. We all walk around with a tiny computer in our hands.
We do every
and where we
day.
can do everything on it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can do anything you want. And who would have believed that that would have happened? And you might have thought even in that situation, well, who all is that replacing? And the truth is it hasn't replaced anyone. It has changed.
shifted
It
things.
shifted
Yeah, for
things.
sure.
It's kind of made some modifications.
Mhm.
And as in anything, it's important for you to keep up with that.
Yeah.
And so even with this, the more you can educate yourself and not be afraid,
Yes.
learn and find applications and,
Yeah.
really kind of, because to your point, I use it all the time now. I love it. It's a great administrative assistant. And
Yes.
there are a lot of people out there who aren't great communicators.
Mhm.
And to your point on, you can ask it to help you formulate a response to an email. And
Yeah.
I think about a lot of people who have grown up in the world of sending out text messages
Mhm.
and, just like short little things. They're not always great communicators as a result of that. So
Yeah.
then when you transition into an environment where you have to know how to communicate, and HR is certainly one where you really do need to.
Absolutely. Yes.
So utilizing even to write difficult conversations
Mhm.
and or maybe it's a challenging letter that you're writing, or maybe it's a really fun upbeat thing and you're not a fun upbeat person and you need a little help with it.
Make this fun.
Make
Yeah.
this fun. Exactly. I think that embracing it is really kind of the key to it, and try to alleviate a little bit of that fear. So, Cyndi, as we kind of wrap this episode up, what's some advice that you might give to our listeners, or what can we reach out to them a little bit? So, give me some thoughts on that.
Yeah, speaking of reaching out again, because you and I know about this much,
Yes.
right? And it's this big iceberg that we're not even seeing
Not even
the
seeing.
whole part
Yeah,
of, right?
absolutely.
I would love to just ask, people if they want to call in, contact us
Yes.
at herresourcespodcast@gmail.com. Let us know if you know more than we do, which likely they do.
Probably do.
Just go out there on a
Absolutely.
limb and say they probably do.
Yeah.
I'd love to have some of those folks, give us
Me
some
too.
information, maybe even
Yeah.
come on and
Absolutely.
talk to our
Yeah.
audience,
If you're an
right?
expert in AI or even pretending to be an expert in AI,
You
because
know more than we do.
we would love to have you on. So if you have an interest in coming on, talking a little bit more about AI, especially in the world of human resources,
Yeah.
we'd love to have you come on as well. So no, this would be great. Well, and Cyndi and I will share some resources out there as well. So, as you subscribe to the podcast and as Cyndi said, just email us. We'd love to hear from you, and we're happy to then give you access to these resources that we have. And, we'll all continue the learning journey together. So,
I love that.
yeah, me too. Well, as always, it's wonderful to see you.
You too. Thank you so much. This
thank
was a fun
you.
conversation.
This was a fun
A
one. And
lot
this is
more to
going to be, oh
come.
my goodness, we have, like you said, barely
Yeah.
scratched the surface. This one's going to be interesting to watch as it continues to
Yes.
grow, for sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, you too. And give Buckley a smooch on the nose for
I
me.
will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the HR Her Resources podcast. We're so happy to have you with us on this journey. Music and production by Logan Misegadis of LJM Productions. We'd also like to thank our intern, Lauren Banas, for creating our logo and supporting our social media postings. If you'd like to connect with Logan or Lauren, you can find their information in the show notes. If you found value in our discussion and think someone else might as well, please follow and subscribe to our LinkedIn and share with a friend. Until our next episode, please take care and continue to support one another.